I think we're live. Yeah, I see you. All right.
The live little button.
Yeah. All right. So here we are. Happy Juneteenth, everybody. I don't know. I can't really tell how many people we might have with us. Does anybody know just yet?
Not on our side.
I wonder if it's worth waiting a little bit to see if,
Some stragglers.
Yeah. In my mind, I was thinking, well, it's virtual. Everybody's here, but maybe it's worth waiting a little.
I think so.
Yeah.
I managed to be late somehow.
Yeah. Right. 70 people. All right. I guess that's enough people to start with. Yeah. Just launch into it. All right. Well, hello. I'm Danny Vasquez. I'm an assistant editor at FSG. Happy Juneteenth. Today we're launching Read, Discuss, Disrupt, a radical reading. This has been organized by a community of Black, Indigenous, POC-led publishing workers. This is a reading series dedicated to critical analysis of radical Black literature. Through this effort, we're hoping to design a sort of roadmap for our pursuit to a more equitable future of publishing, a more equitable world. This community of publishing workers first came together on June 8th in protest of the publishing industry's complicity in the state-sanctioned murder of Black people. The June 8th action was shown how powerful we can be when we come together as a collective, and if we hope to further incite widespread change, we have to continue to come together outside of our workplace. We have to dedicate ourselves to political education. We have to develop support systems to counterbalance the industry's exploitation, and we have to create programs that respond to the concerns of our colleagues across the industry and create space for Black and POC workers to lead our efforts. Read, Discuss, Disrupt was conceived and organized with those imperatives in mind. The titles in this series are going to cover a broad range, including history, theory, fiction, poetry, and children's books. And the readings are going to take many forms, including discussions and readings and Q&As with authors. For our launch, we partnered with the independent nonprofit, the Feminist Press, as a means of highlighting the kind of cross-publisher coalitions we're hoping to build. For 50 years, the Feminist Press has been at the forefront of promoting freedom of expression and social justice. Today, we're going to hear from Jamia Wilson, publisher of the Feminist Press, Tomi Onabanjo, academic marketing assistant, Macmillan, Foyinsi Adegmonmeyer, editorial assistant at Macmillan Children's Publishing Group, and Georgia Bodnar, editor, Viking Books.
Thanks, Danny. Good to go. Danny, thanks for the introduction. Hi, y'all. My name is Tomi Onabanjo. I'm the academic marketing assistant at Macmillan Publishers. And I'm here to give a bit more background on the reason why we decided to come together today. So I hope, as many of you all know, that today is Juneteenth. And we chose to launch our reading series on this day for a reason. For those unfamiliar, Juneteenth has been an important holiday in the African-American community since the postbellum period. On June 19th, 1865, almost 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, Union soldiers finally arrived in Galveston, Texas. These soldiers brought the historic announcement: the Confederacy had surrendered, the Civil War had ended, and all enslaved people had been granted their freedom. As Texas was the last state to receive this news, Juneteenth became a day to recognize the formal independence of all enslaved peoples and the end of slavery in the United States. And so while Juneteenth was initially observed, particularly by Black Texans, over time it has spread across the country to the holiday that we all know and celebrate and acknowledge today. At this present moment in time, Juneteenth feels more necessary than ever. African Americans continue to exist within the confines of an oppressive system where freedom seems to be perpetually delayed. Yet the groundswell of protests against state-sanctioned brutality in the recent weeks show just how much folks are no longer going to wait for freedom to arrive. We'll heed the words of the civil rights activist, Jaleel Hassan. Quote, "It is a mistake to think that time alone will win for us. Time is a neutral factor. You have to work in that time to get anywhere." And as a community of publishing workers from different sectors and areas, we all value reading together and educating ourselves as a necessary part of the work that will move us toward a future liberation. So we thought an appropriate way to celebrate Juneteenth this year, a holiday where one of its core tenets is education, would be to launch this reading series that you're all here today. Read-ins are meant to be spaces of protests where folks come together to grapple with new ideas and learn from each other in radical ways. Through this series, we hope to create space where folks from all races can come together and work through texts particularly selected by the Black publishing community, which exemplify one of the most radical ideas of all, a future of Black freedom and full Black humanity in its many facets. So now I'm gonna virtually hand the mic, or that way, over to one of my fellow organizers, Wincy, who provide a bit more background on how we turned this initial idea that we all had into reality.
Okay, hi everyone. As Tommy said, I'm Koyenzi, and I work as an editorial assistant under Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. So after deciding on the idea to do a reading series, it seemed like the best way to compile this list was to ask a group of Black publishing workers across the entire industry for suggestions on titles that they wanted included on this list. So we kept the parameters very wide. We didn't limit on topic, format, genre, category, or anything like that. As a result of this, we got 24 titles that range across adult and children's, fiction and nonfiction, as well as essay collections, memoirs, fantasy, and more. So once the list was ready, a voting form was sent to those who participated in the June 8th action, and they were encouraged to share the form as widely as possible so that we could get as many voices as possible to help us decide on this first title. And by the time the voting period had ended, we'd received over 300 votes, with the winning title earning 16.5% of the vote. So I'm very happy to announce today that the winning title, as voted on by the people, is, drumroll please, by Mickey Kendall. Woo! Yes, so we're actually very fortunate because the person who suggested the title is not only here with us today, but she also happens to be the book's editor. Please welcome Georgia Bodner, editor at Viking Books under Penguin Random House. Georgia acquires serious nonfiction by activists, journalists, essayists, memoirists, historians, and others writing about big ideas with an activist impulse. Her authors include the activist DeRay McKesson, comedian and actor Aparna Nancherla, and the author of I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, Erica Sanchez. And who better to be in conversation with Georgia than Jamia Wilson, executive director and publisher of the Feminist Press. Jamia is an activist, a speaker, and has written widely about feminist issues for numerous outlets. She is also the author of several books, including Young, Gifted, and Black, Together We Rise, Behind the Scenes at the Protest Heard Around the World, and others. I'm very excited to hear what they have to say about hood feminism and about our industry. Woo.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I'm
you.
just so excited to be with you all, and thank you for organizing this space. It feels very radical to be together, and I love us. Happy Juneteenth. And I am really excited to dive in with Georgia and ask her, what is hood feminism about?
Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about this book. It's a book that's really close to my heart. And it's a collection of essays which has as at its center this question: do all women actually have a common set of interests? Does today's feminist movement, which purports to be a movement for all women, actually serve all women? Mickey argues that it doesn't. And her reasons are because some of the most pressing issues that affect most women, things like food security, access to quality education, safe neighborhoods, living wage, these kinds of things are not treated as urgent feminist issues. And why is that? This book is trying to ask. Why is it that basic needs of so many women are ignored? Why is it that women in need are so often blamed for their plight? It's because the animated force behind feminism today is gender parity, and specifically the desire of white women to take their rightful place alongside white men. Power plays a huge role here. And we don't always talk about what different power exists among different groups of women. The fact of the matter is that we're not all fighting for the same causes, and certainly not in the same way. the fact that white women can and do oppress non-white women, and even in some cases non-white men, is something that must be reckoned with. And Mickey is asking us to do exactly that in this collection.
Thank you so much. So I'm wondering too, because this is such a cutting edge book and needed to be interrogated and brought forth new ideas and a new conversation, what was the acquisition process like? Was there a big auction?
The acquisition process was somewhat easier than probably it should have been. And I think that's because the auction wasn't as competitive also as it could have been. Even for me to bring a book like Hood Feminism, with a title like Hood Feminism, to my editorial board, I'm the only Black editor on my editorial board. You know, it was something to raise that book in that room and to talk about the things that this book addressed, and to get behind it and to ask what for me was certainly and is objectively like a pretty substantial amount of money to compete for it. And of course, it's easy to say in hindsight that it should have been more competitive now because of the market is sort of bearing that out because it's been very successful. But I certainly felt that way at the time as well.
And in championing it, what was it about the book that spoke to you that inspired you to go deep and champion it in the way that you did?
I mean, I really loved this book at the proposal stage. And there was one sentence in particular that just gripped me. And it's now the opening sentence of the book, but at the time it wasn't. I had Mickey move it because I thought that it really enveloped what so much of this book was addressing. And it was, my grandmother would not have described herself as a feminist. That sentence made me think of my own mother, probably the most feminist woman I know, who definitely would not consider herself a feminist. And yet she has been doing all the work of feminism. Black women are undoubtedly the conscience, the soul, and the heart of feminism. So for us not to have a proper claim to driving what have become its animating objectives, so much so that so many of us don't consider ourselves feminists, and don't take claim to this movement, don't see it as our movement, it calls into question, for me, the entire legitimacy of the movement. And I think it's one of the most morally pressing questions, certainly, of our time.
And
oh, sorry.
I was just going to say what I think is so important about kind of why you saw that this was an important book to have in the conversation is about a reclamation. I think that's something that I really see that this book does in the context and conversation around feminism, is a reclamation of Black feminist history, because Gloria Steinem, who the media has, put forth as emblematic of representing a certain wave of feminism, has said many times that Black women taught her how to be feminist and taught her feminism. And there are countless other second wave feminists who have also had that experience, that people like Flo Kennedy and Dorothy Pittman Hughes were there speaking truth to power, Shirley Chisholm, but their stories weren't uplifted, the actions that they were taking. And so I really appreciate you saying that. And so much so that when I did my grandmother's obituary, I actually put in it that she had been a feminist leader, although I'd only heard her describe herself as a feminist a few times in life, but wanted to put that there because I thought that a woman who taught Tuskegee Airmen how to swim as an Olympic athlete, a junior Olympic athlete, and a Tuskegee athlete at that time when it was very rare for Black women to go to college, deserved to get the credit for the leadership that she showed that inspired other people. And knowing that that's something that she claimed, but also knowing that the name of feminism and the sort of appropriation that has happened of shaping and describing histories in ways that erase our contributions is very pernicious and also violent. So I love that you're lifting that up as well in terms of interrogating, whose movements are we really in and enlivening and claiming that space and owning Black women's role in building it. So yeah, I feel like Mickey's book in my mind is in conversation with books like Bridge Called My Back. And I think it's an important text.
Yeah, and I thank you for saying that. I think, and I certainly don't want to take credit for it. It's Mickey completely behind the driver's seat here, but it is something that I just feel so strongly about. And certainly in my own evolution, when I came to think of myself as a feminist, it was like, in my 20s and when I moved to New York, and I think that I just never felt like it was mine, that I was doing that work. And so this is a book, I think, that speaks to all of us about what is ours, and tells us to lay claim to it, and says that it's time for white women to take a really good look at themselves and what they're putting forward and what they're advancing and who they're leaving out. And I think right now we need a message like this, as always, as ever. So I think it's actually a really nice lead in, a nice segue to talk about what you're doing at the Feminist Press. I want to talk a little bit about the Feminist Press. You have now been the executive director there for 3 years. You're the first Black executive director in its history, and also the youngest. How did this come to be?
Yeah, so I think I ask myself that question often, right? That how did it come to be that in its 47th year, I became the first woman of color and the first Black woman at the press? And I think for me, a series of events led to it. And I feel that it's always been a part of my story. Having had a byline at Feminist Press, one of my first writing bylines in a book was in the I Still Believe Anita Hill anthology, and being a contributor to that as one of the speakers who was able to say that I became a feminist because of Anita Hill, that was the moment that radicalized me as a very young girl, tween at that time. And realizing that there were disagreements in my family between me and the men about how this woman was being treated, and seeing this media narrative and understanding then that there were these intersections in my life that I was going to have to grapple with. And so that led me to connect with Feminist Press. And then also having been raised with some of those books in my home, like our Black Feminist Reader, But Some of Us Are Brave, that my mother gave me off of her shelf as a Black feminist and professor, and the Zora Neale Hurston, I Love Myself When I'm Laughing, and Then Again When I'm Mean and Impressive, which is our longest title, I think, in the history of Feminist Press. But that book that was edited by Alice Walker, and the process between her and our founder, Florence Howe, surfacing Zora Neale Hurston's work, had been a part of my life, and Feminist Press had been a place where I had continuously gone to kind of understand and complicate my own feminism. And so when I was asked if I was interested in applying for the role, I went in thinking that I wasn't likely to get the role because I didn't have publishing experience beyond being a writer. I hadn't done the internships. I hadn't been a part of the institutes. I hadn't worked my way up within the ranks of publishing. And I went in and kind of owned that and said, although I need to learn about production, although I need to learn these other facets of what publishing is about, I do know movements, and I do know storytelling, and I do know what the cultural zeitgeist of this moment needs. And I also believe that what I gained from my experience being an editor at TED and doing a lot of digital editorial work and writing for magazines like Rookie, that I felt that I would be able to be a part of the vision that was needed for an even deepening, intersectional, multi-generational, next generation feminist press into the future. And when they did call me to tell me that I got the job, and I will admit I was shocked, I actually said to our board chair, who is a Black woman who's a journalist and in publishing, am I the first Black woman that is in this role? And I kind of had this recognition later on that it was going to be historic. And so when I did get the role, I was also really overcome with inspiration and excitement by the letters of support that we got from around the world. I'll never forget, actually, Jeray, who is on your list, posted about it, and several actors and just a lot of people who I didn't know were fans of feminist literature, who were just saying, this is a moment for us. And so I've felt that way since I've been in the role, that this isn't about me at all. I feel like this is a moment for us. And we've seen a spike in our submissions and a spike on submissions from women of color. And that's exciting.
That's amazing. And it speaks to really how important that visibility is for us and what it does and how it affects people. So what can you speak to what the ethos of the press has traditionally been? And now we have about 5 more minutes. But quickly, I'd love to hear about what the ethos of the press has traditionally been and how you think it might change or evolve under your tenure.
So one thing I love about the feminist press is, unlike a lot of organizations that came about at that time, the feminist press was always named the feminist press. It wasn't named the women's press. That there was a clear vision that feminism was about more than one gender, that it was about all marginalized genders, and that it had intersection with race and class, et cetera. And that we were not prescriptive of a type of feminism, but we were a place where you could complicate and interrogate feminisms, plural. And we are still holding tight to that strong foundation and legacy. But what we're doing now is really digging into the systemic pieces of being a part of that transformative change, and doubling down on the systemic change piece, as well as doubling down on really zeroing in on the most insurgent, marginalized voices and lifting those voices up in our list. And our new mission that we unveiled with our 50th anniversary is that we exist to create a more just world, and also to create a more just world where everyone recognizes themselves in a book. And so we're really just deepening that in, and we think about these things not just in terms of the content in the books, but also in how we produce the books. What typefaces are we using? Are they feminist typefaces? Are we using designers who are connected to the communities that we're writing about in the subject matter, and really being thoughtful about that? And we do have one thing that we've really maintained throughout the history, which is a democratic editorial process. So everyone in the team weighs in on every book we acquire, which I think is also unique, but something that we really value and have continued to carry that into the next phase.
So is it a democratic acquisition process?
It is.
Or I guess it's a question, it's a clarifying question. So you said it was a democratic editorial process. At the acquisition stage, subsequent to the acquisition stage, or just the acquisition stage?
At the acquisition stage, I mean, I think in a way I could argue that it's subsequent, in the sense that we're so small, and in terms of our team,
right,
that any book we acquire, part of why, because we believe in a feminist ethos, and we're not, gatekeeping exists in publishing, right? So I like to say we're liberated gatekeepers, but that we are mindfully trying to do this differently. But because of the fact that we are publishing maybe 12, 15 books a year, we know that every person on the team is a doula to that book. Everyone is a champion. And if we are going to acquire your book, it means that everyone's going to know your name, that all of our hands and ideas are going to be on it, and that you're going to interface with everyone at FP at some time who's going to be holding your book and championing it across the finish line.
That's a beautiful thing that I think independents are really able to do in a way that, bigger houses just can't. A place like Viking, for instance, will publish 75 titles in a year. I myself would do 6 or 8. So the idea that anyone else would really be anywhere near as involved as I would that's why I was like, a democratic editorial process.
Yes, and I meant at the acquisition stage, but in the editorial team, we do have an editor who leads on each book, but we do have, I would say, a lot of people weighing in. So for example, my assistant gets to be very hands-on in the process, as well as our editorial assistant really supporting our senior editor, Lauren Hook, who's phenomenal. And we get feedback because everyone in the team has also read all of the books we've acquired because of our editorial process. People give comments, and we give that feedback back to authors as well. So in a way, I do feel like, even though they're lead editors, that everyone has a hand in each book because everyone's given feedback at some point in the process.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. It'd be great for an author just to have that kind of support and love. And you guys are doing awesome things over there, Jamia. It's been
you too.
Fun to get to know you through this, and wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Georgia. I feel so good about where we're going as an industry, knowing that your leadership is there. And so I just want to thank you for all you do. And I can't wait to read all of the rest of the books that were listed today to add to my must-read list that you have championed. So thank you so much. Thank you. Danny, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Georgia, Jamia, that was incredible. Thank y'all so much. That was such a beautiful conversation. And thank you all for joining us for the launch of Read, Discuss, Disrupt, a Radical Reading, a reading series dedicated to critical analysis of radical Black literature. Today, we announced the first pick for the series, Mickey Kendall's Hood Feminism. And there it is, beautiful book. We'll reconvene at the end of July for a group discussion of Hood Feminism. You can purchase the book at the link on our YouTube page or at your local Black-owned bookstore. And please be sure to subscribe to our email list for further updates. Now I'm going to just turn things back over to Jamia for a quick note about the forthcoming Parenting for Liberation by Trina Green Brown from the Feminist Press.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor and a joy to be with you, but especially on Juneteenth, I'm just so excited. And I'm just lifting up Parenting for Liberation, which I had the honor of editing, but again, I feel like there's so many other hands here. Shout out to Nick Whitney and Lauren Hook and Rachel Page, many other people on the team who were a part of getting this book across the finish line. And this is a guidebook. Parenting for Liberation is a guidebook for raising Black children. It combines personal storytelling, practical exercises, and methods for parenting related and rooted in liberation versus fear. And what I love about it, as someone who's an aspiring Black parent of Black children, is that I've learned so much about how to parent myself from this book. There's so much guidance about how to liberate ourselves from systems that aren't working for us and internalized oppression, as well as embracing joy and joyful defiance and love and community in this book. So I highly recommend it. And at 7:30 Eastern tonight, Cheris Books is hosting a Juneteenth launch for Parenting for Liberation. We actually picked Juneteenth over a year ago to be the launch date for this book and had no idea about what was going to happen with Juneteenth around the nation. We had no idea that the university that we're housed in would declare it a holiday. We had no idea. We just knew that this was a Black book with Black designers and a Black author, and we wanted it to come out on Juneteenth, even though it's not a Tuesday. And so we're having a moment right now of just thinking about Black futures and how we can imagine and reimagine and do the things we feel like we need to do for our community right now. So if you are free at 7:30, join us, meet author Trina Green Brown. She is amazing. She's going to be in conversation with Deneen Milner, who's the author of My Brown Baby. You might have read her amazing work in the New York Times. She's a New York Times bestseller and has written a lot about parenting African-American children. And the link to register is below in YouTube. And we just are so grateful for your time tonight and hope to see you there and hope to stay connected and hope that in the meantime, you will have each other's back and continue to love and support each other. As Asada told us, we have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Peace, y'all.
Happy Juneteenth.
Bye.
Happy Juneteenth, everybody. Bye.